Yeah, so I got up early this morning.
Okay.
Rolled out of bed. It's dark out, you know? Or the couch.
As it is in winter.
Yeah. It's the hardest thing about waking up. It's just waking up to darkness. And I remember that Doey's been, or at least, yesterday when we were working out, he was saying, gotta watch the new Bean video. Homesick. So I find it. That was the first 25 minutes of my morning.
Okay.
Beans.
Before coffee?
Sipping,
during coffee?
Sipping as we go. Yeah. I definitely am going to need to watch it again, and that's something that brought up with Josh yesterday was that parkour videos, and this is kind of what's happened to us a couple times with recent reviews on them. So you put it on, you're watching, you're trying to get into it. You know, you're trying to get into it. And if there's not a lot bringing you into it, then it kind of falls flat, especially for guys like us that have just seen a lot of these types of videos for 15 plus years. So I definitely need to give it a rewatch. I know you haven't seen it yet.
Yeah.
First initial thought was, if you had shown me a tricking video or a skate video, I would have been like, cool, I don't know how hard a lot of this stuff is. But I like some of it, you know, some of it is cool stuff. And then kind of similar to last week when we were talking about Jaden Harris's videos, it's not really my favorite flavor of parkour when the spots are flat and there's not a lot of structures involved and it's very trick heavy style. But it's also kind of something that is of the like where they're from. Because I think they're all like California kids, if I'm not mistaken, or except for Ross. Ross is not. Sorry, they're from all. They're a little spread
I think
out.
a lot of them live in Colorado now.
Huh. Okay. Because I know like Josh Malone is a California kid.
Who now I think is in Colorado.
Okay. Because they have better spots out there, but they're choosing these like spots that I wouldn't call spots. Things you'd walk by where it's like there are 2 boxes there. All right.
Well, this is a good question. So, you know, it's how much of styles are dictated by the environment that you're in.
Yeah.
Right. Like, I mean, personally, I have always been around like pretty interesting architecture, and so I've been more on the traditional parkour side of things. But I would say that what interested me from the start was the traditional parkour. So it's what I saw in videos as well. So it's like there's like the cultural element and then there's literally the environmental element. And which one of those is playing more heavily into the Bean style coming out right now? Mm-hmm. Is it because their spots are flat, or is it more because that's what they're interested in and that's the movement style that they're interested in pursuing?
Yeah, I'd say it's probably a bit of both. And when we were talking again, Josh Doey, we're working out yesterday, and he started parkour in Calgary. And Calgary, like downtown, we were there recently, and they got spots. You know, there's a lot that we got kicked out of, but we explored for like a day.
2 days, really.
Yeah, but I think like both of us would agree that if we lived there, we would find the things to do.
There's lots of cool stuff.
There's also some very accessible rooftop run things that we did not explore.
But the main style that came out of Calgary was more of like a trick-based, like almost Bean style before Beans
And those
existed.
guys, like the Pody Boys from Calgary, love the Bean style. And part of that too is their winters are so harsh that you're forced into an indoor facility. And they had gymnastics gyms. They also had a place before Breathe actually acquired this space called No Limits. And it was a very small like parkour / ninja / tricking space. So they didn't have a lot of structures. They had and then they had like a foam box. And so this is where those guys develop their style in the colder months, in the months where they couldn't really train, and then when it's time to go outside, they're going to the spots there are kind of flat, you know, the planters and whatnot.
There's definitely a lot of things. Like, if you have the right person, go, in that world, you're gonna see a lot more traditional parkour being done in the
like
architecture of
when they used to have Century Gardens, when it was actually before it got demolished, like that was a great place to do a lot of parkour if you didn't get kicked out.
Yeah. For context, Century Gardens was this massive fountain spot that was on the same level of Freeway Park, if you've ever been to Seattle, or Cat Fountain, as it's called in Denver. Similar, like, I think it's all the same architect that designed those structures. So yeah, I'm just thinking about like who else is in Beans. So like you mentioned Ross, and Ross is from Colorado Springs, and I actually don't think there's very many spots in Colorado Springs. In fact, like the only spot I can think of from Colorado Springs is Cottonwood Park, which is that playground that Dante Grazioli and all those guys came up on, which makes a lot of sense because, I mean, they were just teaching themselves how to flip into wood chips for the first, 5 to 10 years, right? So, and now, Ross is, he has actually quite a diverse ability. Like he could jump, he could do lots of different things, but I think he's choosing more to do a lot of this unique new age style that we're seeing.
Yeah, the video itself, I'll say, is also kind of more just like a documentation of sessions they had sometimes it's 2 of them, sometimes it's 3, sometimes it's a bigger group. But it seems to be more group focused, and not the only, I guess, problem I have with the video and it being a longer one is some of the stuff we've been talking about recently with longer videos where some fluff gets in there. So there are actually some really cool bits that would be really hard for me to describe on camera.
Yeah, unfortunately, I haven't had the chance to watch it, so like we can't really have a full conversation.
We can get into
it
next week.
Like, but on the topic of length, I literally pulled it up yesterday because we were supposed to have this discussion yesterday, and I was like, oh, let me pull up Homesick, and we'll quickly watch it right before we. And I was like expecting like a 5-minute video, and then I was like, 25 minutes. We don't have time to do this right now. So I will get to it, and I meant to get to it this morning, but I had too many other things happening, so couldn't get to it. But maybe next week we'll talk about in depth. We'll break it down from top to bottom.
I don't know how much I'm going to be able to break down in there. It's funny because it's we at one point we said before, like, we talked about parkour on a spectrum. Now we're looking at it as more of a circle, and I would say like what I do is right in the center of that circle.
Okay. I know what you mean.
If it was a spectrum, I would be on one end of the spectrum, but if it's a circle, I'm in the middle of that circle, and I would say like the bean style is kind of falling on the edge of that circle in some aspects, not in all, but some of the stuff that's a lot more tricking heavy. It's just a lot more tricking or like big air parts of big air moves, I guess, when you borrow from skiing. There's a little bit of like footworky stuff, which is, some of it's cool, some of it's a little bit, I could put a Steve Carell track over it and it would fit perfectly, because it just looks like parkour, when they're like spinning around on their heels and stuff.
Don't ever say that.
I mean, that's what it was. I judge parkour content a lot of times like that, when someone does something, even, a guy that we praise a lot on here, like the Matt McCreary's, sometimes stuff comes out where it's like, if it's very silly looking, then it is, and it's just, I feel like I can.
It's interesting, like looking at clips or videos or movement that happens from the lens of somebody who's never heard or seen of parkour before, and just like, what would they think?
Yeah, if you've shown, there's parts in beans. There's one where there's like a bin and it's raining and they're spinning around on it and they're having fun, and that's actually something I really appreciated about the video, is it actually really captured how much fun they're having. And then there's another part where they separated it into parts. So there's a part called bump, and it's one of those like playground rubber mounds.
Oh yeah.
And there's some weak stuff in that part.
Okay.
There's some stuff where it's like I could do that, and I don't do this stuff. So there is some weaker stuff in there, like I said, that fit in. But I don't think that was the intention of the video for it to be like 25 minutes of bangers. I think it's just supposed to be like a vibe. And it is.
For sure.
It is,
and it's honestly, that's kind of getting back to like a lot of the earlier content that came out in parkour, which is vibes, lifestyle, and that was some of what really inspired our generation early on too, right?
Well, it inspired, again, say Josh Dowie again, like he went out with his homies the other day and they had a session. It was a very like Bean inspired sesh, you know, and that's what
it's interesting that Beans is a group of like people that are doing like a type of style, but now we're calling it's like Bean style. And it's funny you mentioned the circle, like the parkour circle, and you're right in the middle. And I'm thinking about this, and it's like, yeah, like how much of this is a different sport or different activity?
To describe, we'll give a little visual, on-screen visual here. So if you imagine this circle here, I wasn't trying to flip everyone off. What we're saying is that you have, outside of the circle, you have gymnastics, tricking, climbing, skiing, just anything that parkour borrows from, and then parkour is within the circle. But I would say like the reason why we think both of us are in the middle of the circle is because you look at what we do and it's definitely parkour. So you get further outside of the circle when it's like, is this still parkour? Right? You get further to the edges there, and I think that's where the Bean stuff falls.
Yeah, and it's funny though, because I mean, okay, so the analogy of like skiing and snowboarding, you're doing it on the same environments, but you're using a different tool to achieve it. So, but snowboarding and skiing are different sports. So it's like, if I start doing exclusively Bean stuff, am I now doing a different sport? This is parkour and free running debate 2.0. Instead, it's parkour and beans.
Yeah.
Actually, I wonder if they consider themselves like people who are free runners.
I think free running, the term free running has just become like a cop-out for, I don't know. I know there's athletes out there that are strongly disagree and have their own sort of nomenclature that they recognize and their own vocabulary they recognize and what free running means. But universally, we're getting so far away from the term free running. Like you just hear it less and less.
Oh yeah, and I think that in general it's falling out of favor, and I've always disliked the term free running. But if somebody knew of parkour as being what Beans are doing, and then they saw you out doing parkour, they'd be like, that's not parkour.
Or like
and how would you feel about
like
that?
A skill challenge, or a speed run.
Yeah, let's
like
say you're doing a speed run.
Clip.
Yeah, let's say you're doing a speed run or something, and somebody was like, "That's not parkour. I've seen parkour before."
Yeah,
how would you feel about?
It's weird too, because like I do some things that still use more traditional moves, but aren't, so much of what we do is inefficient anyway. But like if I were to do a dive, I have a line in my head right now that I did recently where it was like a dash vault. I did like a turn mount, and then I did a dive roll onto a block. So I have like a spinny move that is definitely not efficient, but it got me facing the other direction. And then I have like so they're all like covering ground, but it was a pretty tight spot type of thing. And so that's actually closer to Bean style. The difference is less of them. I have less variation on my movements. Like if I did, instead of a dive roll, if I did a roll full, like roll full. Instead of a dash vault, if I did, I don't know, some sort of like between the legs vault with a grab or whatever, and then, you know, if I did a turn mount, if I did, or palm spin up or whatever you want to call it, if I added like an extra spin in there, that sort of starts to fit more bean style. Plus, you know, a little switch walk in the middle, and then, you know, we're right on there.
Well,
so but what I guess I'm trying to say
is it just variation that we're seeing, right? Like,
yeah. I guess what I'm trying to say is that I would still definitely categorize it as parkour, because they are doing still quite a bit of use of structure, and use of trying to like create with the like things. There's numerous things that you could only do with the structures that they're using, and so I think that becomes more into the definition of parkour. But
yeah,
it is a weird circle that we're.
It's a weird circle we're in. I just think about like a lot of, it's just like what I do is so different from what so many other like styles are. Like even Matt McCreary, my practice is very different from Matt McCreary's practice, but I would say it's closer to Matt's than it is to Josh Malone's.
Yeah. There's a thing I've been saying to myself.
Matt is closer to Josh Malone
for the last couple of years, and it was tough because the last couple of years I've been trying to come back from an injury, and I have goals. I have goals that fit really into the style that I've developed for as long as I've been doing parkour. But I keep saying to myself, like, I want to train with like Josh Dowie or someone that just does stuff that is completely different, just to have that, not really the progress. Like there's so many ways you can go with any sport, really. You can get better at what you're already good at, which is just going to be like slower. You're going to have these tiny incremental increases. You know, you can have mental increase, you can have technical, you can have physical increases there, but it's going to be very slow if you're already really good. Like with dive holes for you, for example, like your progression maybe in the last couple of years, like very like small improvements were likely made, and then occasionally you have like a mental breakthrough to do something you've never done before, right? You can also get better like creatively, which also I guess fits with the dive holes example. You start to find different ways to do what you're already good at, or start to do different moves entirely, and or you can just learn, you know, maybe what you're bad at too. You could, you know, start learning that. And so we kind of all lump all these things in together as progression, but I've always kind of stayed in my lane for the most part. And so like progression has just been so damn slow that way. Whereas anytime you try to learn something new or try to work on something that you're bad at, like I've been spending more time recently this last couple of weeks working on lashes again, and, you know, making some small improvements there, but it's because I'm already not very good at them. And so there's a lot of room for improvement. And then the other thing I want to do is just, start just trying to do stuff that I wouldn't normally do, because it keeps me in the sport, keeps me like I'm, you know, able to watch things and be like, I get what this is because I'm around it a lot more. And I think that would help me a lot with being able to especially comment on videos like a bean video if I'm actually engrossed in that a bit more, because I have a pretty good handle on the jumps and strides and downs and ups and stuff, but and vaults, but not the definitely not the bean style. Yeah, I definitely went through a phase of my training where I was really trying to progress on flips, partially because I was teaching our flips program at the time. So I was like, I need to be fresh and I need to know what the hell I'm doing, and kind of go through the process. But I've since stopped that, and I don't really do any flips except for side flips. Again, it's just so easy. I think you'll agree, it's just so easy for me to put off because you only have so much time. And if I have goals that I really care about, it's like, I'm going to put everything into those goals. And it's, you just, you fill your cup with everything you can. And if it's filled with a lot of stuff that you're already like focused on, then you're not going to be able to branch out.
So you mentioned, you know your jumps, your strides, and your ups and your downs. So I kind of wanted to change the topic here and talk about.
I was hoping this would segue to it.
Talk about the ups and the downs as well. And we mean we're not talking about emotional ups and downs. We're talking about the vertical element of parkour, right? So ascending and descending. So
Descending definitely being the more popular one as of late, that's another topic.
I don't know, because like
come back to.
ascent game, like Descents, I think got really popular, and then Ascent game got really popular, and I think now it's kind of like got to the point where we're seeing similar interest in both.
You must be following different people than me.
Well, like the rise of Shane parkour was like after the whole Descent craze.
I feel like the Descent craze is still, like, we're still in it though. I know it's not because we're seeing Joe Scandra do more interesting and different ways to do descents and not just the same. I think as more people have learned, how to be okay with like cat drops, just the handful of simple techniques that you can do to get down balconies, and so they've learned to be. Some people have discovered that they're mentally tough at being able to get up levels after they've figured out.
Let's say I'm going to say something controversial here. It's easier to do descents than it is to ascend well.
Not mentally. but
like
mentally,
the technique.
If it's high, like look at so Matt Jang, who does both.
Yep.
Some of the stuff some of the ups he does look terrifying because he's letting go and dynoing up. So it's definitely harder. Yeah, I mean in one example, gravity's working in your favor, and the other one it's not.
Yep, exactly. So descending is actually weirdly more accessible.
Yeah, absolutely.
Because if you can't climb up something, you're restricted by how high you can climb.
Another example, this is like, it used to irritate me, many things do, as you know, but it used to really irritate me when people would make posts saying, first descent I've ever done, or just starting to do descents. And it's usually like the most hand touches you've seen, like they're just doing all the touches you can possibly do, they're not actually doing drops. And then a lot of times what we classify too as in that realm is you can do a lot of hat touches. And then there's some people, like I would say like a Sean Higgins, I think if he's using the term descent, he means full drops. I don't even think I think it's the dynamic full drops. It has to be, otherwise it's not even
technique.
Otherwise, like you're learning how to do a descent. So I think he's actually putting words in his mouth. But we have one out here that he called a beginner one that I can't even touch. And it's because it's a full drop. So you need to do. You got your feet dangling to like a 3-foot drop to a ledge or something. And then grabbing a rail in front of you. And that's why he found it easy, because there's like a rail in front of you, whereas he's experienced ones where you have to like re-grab the wall that you're putting your hands on. I don't want to get too much off topic here because I know you want to go back to climbing, but just what I wanted to say there was that, it is more accessible, and it's because you can crawl down something. If you can get yourself over to the edge, you can crawl down. It's just that sometimes I'll avoid that one because public exposure. I don't like getting kicked out. We talked about that a bit last week. Trying to get over it. Trying to expose myself more. Hopefully this summer.
Yikes.
not in the trench coat.
Don't take that
not in the trench
out of
context. Trying to get a little bit looser with what I'm willing to do parkour on, we'll say. Anyways, a lot of times, like I just won't, particularly if I'm training alone, I won't do stuff like that just because it just looks sketchy. It just feels sketchy. And if I'm not in my head thinking I'm going to be crawling down the outside of this so that I can work up to the drops, then it's not even worth it for me to crawl down the outside. If the plan in my head is I'm crawling down because eventually I'm going to do these drops, then cool, there we go. I think part of it too is I'm not I'm not motivated personally to go and put myself in it. One, because it's going to take me a long time mentally to commit to drops that are up high. So I know that it's just like, it's going to take so much work. But two is like, I just am not, I think I'm just comparing myself to some of the guys that are great at it, and it's like, they would start at the 7th story. So if I do 2 stories, it's not really worth it.
They wouldn't start at the 7th story.
Yeah,
they would start at the lower stories.
They would complete it from there, and I'm like, that would take me months.
But yeah, I mean that shouldn't stop you though, because you could still like develop technique and more strength of mind at lower levels, and
if you can find the lower levels.
That's true, which is not often the case. You're not always able to find those. So I think there's a problem with descents being too accessible.
Explain that to me. Explain too accessible.
Too accessible meaning that so the technique itself is not particularly challenging, especially if you're not even doing the cat drop, you're just like crawling yourself down. Yeah. So it becomes very accessible to somebody who's just a little bit strong mentally to like start.
Yeah. Quick aside question. If you're dropping down and this is climbing, say you're bouldering, is that a dyno? Is that a down dyno? Like if you showed a climber, someone who's really into climbing, and you showed them a cat drop, would they be like, oh, that was a cool down dyno? Or is it just so hard to define?
As you know, I'm not a climber. I would expect that, yes, because you're not controlling the descent like in a slow, static manner. It would be considered dynamic, which is what dyno is short for. So yes, I would say a drop down with both hands would be a double dyno.
Okay, because I've been in a climbing gym before where I've heard like down dyno or drop, aside from someone. So the other way to just kind of just describe it for listeners is we're saying crawling, but really you're climbing down. You know? Like we're kind of, I think you're definitely climbing down. It's just that if there's a point where it's more dynamic, there's definitely like a let go, then it's a downward dyno.
Yeah, well, just the way I think about it is like if at any point you don't have any contact with the structure, like that is the cat drop that you're doing. If you are maintaining even only one point of contact, you're reducing the dynamicness of it, if I could use such a word. And it's also becoming infinitely more accessible because you're now not having to actually let go. So there's obviously different levels that you can take it to, and different structures will enable you to either use more points of contact or would require you to do less points of contact. But even at like, we'll say the more advanced level of like fully releasing cat drops, that is a relatively simple technique that's not too difficult to learn if you have like if you have a bottom level that you can practice it on, right? And so therefore, descents themselves are 90% mental and has low technical or physical requirements.
I think I can mostly agree with that. Maybe not the same percentage, but I don't know what I would put it at.
Sure.
But,
yeah, I mean,
I can agree with like the spirit of what you're saying there.
Okay.
And so the point we're trying to establish here, and I hope everyone's not hearing that. We got some construction going on in the gym, so we could definitely hear it. I don't know if it's going to pick up on here, so apologies if you hear any drill sounds through the rest of this pod. But you're saying that going up is less accessible because of the strength requirement or the technical requirement, or both?
Strength, technical, and mental.
Yeah. If you're going higher, for sure.
If you're going higher, yeah. But yeah,
which is also why we don't see it.
Exactly.
Too. Yeah. Like you don't see a Joe Scandrett. You see him going down 10 stories. You don't see him going up 10 stories.
No. Well, he
also, in a lot of ways,
he did in the capstone. He did climb up those 10 stories, but it's obviously slow and not like particularly exciting to watch. So that's cut out. So anyway, so the reason, one reason that we wanted to bring this up is there's been two very recent cat drop descent bails.
Do you still want to talk about climbers?
I do, but we'll get to it.
Okay, all right. Okay, we'll do that next. We'll do that
So
next.
this is why I'm saying it's like it's too accessible.
Yeah.
Right?
Okay.
You could be like, and this isn't to take away. I mean, so one of these bales was from Christian Green, who has been doing parkour for a while and is relatively experienced in this.
Well, real quick on Christian Green, he was the first guy from Colorado I ever met, and that had to have been, I want to say maybe 2010, something like that, somewhere around 2010, maybe before, maybe a little before, a little after. We had a session at Freeway Park. We met in Seattle. I was like, Colorado people are great. They're just like Vancouver people. This is awesome. Anyway, great guy, Christian Green. I'm not sure if he's a listener, but great guy. And he took a break from parkour, but he's been at it for a while. He also, I believe, trained in the circles, at least, of the, we'll say, the founders of the Descent movement, right? So we're not talking about someone who just saw videos and was like, I'll give this a whirl. He's very much in it, and yeah, as you're alluding to, he
basically fell
suffered.
like 2.5 stories or something like that, and ended up breaking his ankle and I think hit his head and stuff like that. He's seemingly totally okay otherwise. He's obviously got his foot in a cast, but he did write a post about it and shared it, and basically was talking about how he rushed the process on this one, and he was he kind of took it for granted, or took like the preparation for granted, and just kind of like went for it, which is not recommended if you're doing stuff, first of all, at height, but also if you're doing something with a high level of risk in general. But the other one was somebody from, I think, Taiwan, who fell from like 3 stories and got a concussion, and that one...
Is that the one you showed me?
That was yeah.
Okay.
That was the one I showed you. And that one's pretty rough. Luckily, he fell on grass, and it was kind of a hill too, so it was like...
That one also looked like it didn't have a prep.
Worse.
It looked like the...
Yeah, and it looked like he didn't really have any business trying it to begin with, because he clearly didn't understand that you need to like push your body away before releasing so that you have forward momentum. He just kind of tried to drop, and when you just try to drop, your weight is just going to land coming backwards, which is exactly what happened, and he just fell backwards onto his back and smashed his head.
So it's funny, he's missing that 10%.
He's missing, yeah.
He had 90%.
He had the 90% mental. He needed the 10% technical. So
he's also okay though. I'm not.
He's just recovering from a concussion. Okay. But yeah, he in his post he said that he was okay and he's doing better now. But yeah, so this is 2 very recent bales that are extremely like high risk scenarios, and luckily they were both okay. And I use air quotes because they still came out with significant injury.
Yeah.
And they're lucky that it wasn't worse.
Yeah.
So a word to the wise is be very cautious working through descents, and don't just assume. In Christian Green's case, like you can't just assume that everyone is going to be like the last one and that it's just going to go fine. You have to still go through the process and still be well prepared before you go for something of extreme risk.
Yeah. And as you mentioned, the accessibility of it also, and the popularity, and I think Callum Powell made a post like years ago.
Callum tip?
Yeah, made a Callum tip about Descents, and saying, and I've heard this. I don't know if he said it in that one or if it was someone else saying that someone's gonna die eventually, but yeah, like probably someone's gonna die, because you're so. And his argument was that you're exposed, the length of time you're exposed for, like how long. Like if you do a gap jump, you're exposed for you're exposed for one leap. If you're doing several stories, you're exposed on the first one, you're exposed again on the next one, and the next one. And a lot of these guys are trying to do them faster too. Mm-hmm. So
and that's the goal of a lot of parkour, is to do things at speed, right?
And
interestingly, for both of these two bails that happened, it was the very first one that they messed up. Right? So it's literally, they're falling from the highest point possible on these.
Well, in Christian's case, I think there may have been another story.
There was another story, but he didn't do that one. And I don't know if it was actually an excess. I don't know if that was actually a doable cat drop. Anyway.
I guess the thing too is like Ascents are, if they're dynamic and they're going that high, just as risky, if not riskier.
100%. Yeah. I mean, and
imagine you're fatigued. Imagine you get, that's, again, it's probably why we don't see it, because the physicality and the mental needs to be that much higher. Like I even think about the one that you never want to do again at the end of Ascension 2, where it's like you had to tell yourself, like you're not that fatigued when you get to that, because you did a climb up, you did one, and then you did another one, right?
I also did a lot of preparation where I would literally practice repping. Yeah. Like at the very bottom level.
Only a few years of prep.
4 years. But I would literally practice repping it because I wanted to like make sure I was able to hit it after, let's say I would do 5 in a row. I only had to do it 2 plus like a wall run and a climb up, and there's a climb up on each one. So I only had to do it twice, but I was doing it 5 times in a row at the low level because I wanted to make sure that even under fatigued conditions, I would still be able to grab it. So I was over preparing for it, but that was the move that needed to happen. So, but yeah, I don't want to have to do that one again. That one was very exposed. In fact, your feet are kind of inset and you're leaning back, and then when you jump, your body comes out away, and you have to be using that undercling to pull yourself forward to make the grab. So that was a very exposed one, and but I was super well prepared for it. I had the technical, I had the physical, and then I just needed to get the mental through preparation. And then once that happened, I was able to do it, and I did it twice. And yeah, I don't ever want to have to do it again. But yeah, I think you're right in that's why we don't see a lot of it, is because you have to have the physical capability, you have to have the technical capability of being able to climb up in the first place, but also you need to be mentally prepared to go for it. And then part of that physical is like making sure that you don't just run out of gas. So that you can still make the last dyno or the last climb up or whatever it is.
Yeah. Like I've looked, there's a couple that Matt Jang has posted where close to the top, it's like, dang, he still had enough. Yeah. By the time he got up there in his barefoot ways. Yeah.
He's super strong too. Yeah. Like it's pretty impressive. And he's doing it barefoot, which is like, I couldn't even imagine.
The thought occurred to me, barefoot. He must have so many people that comment on his posts, like, why are you barefoot? And it's like, does it matter when I'm 4 stories up? Does it really matter when he's that high? It's not like he's going to be landing on his feet anyways.
Yeah. So this brings us into climbing. So climb ups. So part of ascending is getting good climb ups. So now's the time.
Happens at the end.
Now's the time when I plug the climb up video that we just posted, which is for anyone who already can do a climb up but wants to improve it beyond a certain level, and especially if they want to include it in lines, if they're doing ascents, or just in general, if there's a climb up that's in a line. We all too often we see people struggle through climb ups, especially when they're in lines, and so this video is intended to help that person with 3 very, I would say simple tips, but very, still very difficult at the same time, to try to apply in their climb up training.
Two of them are also challenges, and I think that should appeal to parkour people.
Yes, yeah. So here's a question I wanted to pose to you, and I mentioned this question earlier before we started recording, but why do you think it is that for a skill that's so old in parkour, why is it that so many people are still so bad at it?
It's like it's a center of the circle skill.
So too many people
climbing up a wall.
Saying too many people out to the outsides and not enough people like working their
That's
core
definitely
game.
part of it. And I remember, I think it was Ryan Ford back in the day. He threw out corks, and he said, you shouldn't be able to cork before you can climb up. And I don't know if I would go that far, because it's probably take you less time to be good at a climb up than a cork, I would imagine. If you start both those skills on the same day, unless someone is like super leg heavy, they might have an easier time with the cork than the climb up. To get, to a level that we would say you're not struggling through, because even to put a cork into a line, pretty tough, right?
Yeah, for sure.
So I would say it probably takes longer to get a high level cork than a high level climb up. I don't know. You're looking like you wouldn't really agree with that, but anyway, we chew on that for a second.
So wait, you think it takes longer to get a high level cork than a high level climb up?
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah.
Yeah. But that was something that Ryan, I think, threw out back in the days, because he would see people achieving that skill in supposedly doing a sport that fits in the circle before they could do a climb up. We look at I'm sure if we lined up the Beans crew and asked them to do climb ups, you probably wouldn't be too pleased with their performance there. But
prove me wrong, Beans.
A couple of them maybe, but they're kind of, the style moves are kind of they're more embracing things that are outside the circle than within the circle.
Corks come from tricking, which is outside of the circle, but a cork pre is more inside the circle because they're using the structure. Yeah. Or like step vault cork, right, is starting to get more into. Anyway.
I think the thing, though, if I do have to say why, why do we see good climb up, but not great climb up, or not as good as it could be? Some of it has to do with, and when we say like not as good, is usually there's like a flow break. So, because I think some people just don't get it. They'll see someone get to a nice like arm position, they'll pull up and get to a nice snap arm position and be like, good climb up. There's still a part where your feet got to get on top of the wall, particularly if there's another move that's going to happen after. And I think that's where we lose people because the standard isn't super high there. But the standard also isn't super high for a lot of times for footwork in between moves either, right? And so we're kind of...
So here's kind of what I'm thinking. So like you were saying, people are too much to the outside, and that's why. There's still people who are dead center who still struggle with understanding of climb up. So my thoughts on this is that there's less understood about climb up technique than there is about Kong technique or precision landing technique. And I would say even those skills, there's lots of misunderstandings of how they work but I would say more focus is put into developing your Kong than in developing your climb up. Mm-hmm. Because once you can do a climb up, most people don't continue improving it. Mm-hmm. But once you can do a Kong, you're gonna see if you can Kong further or Kong further or Kong further. And so Kongs are actually easily measurable, whereas climb ups are more qualitatively measured. And so it's very difficult to understand how to improve beyond a certain point if you don't know what good quality looks like.
Yeah. Well, I think you just mentioned it there too, where a Kong, you can do a lot more with the output of it. Like there's just, it opens you up like a Kong pre, right? Mm-hmm. And then, I can Kong pre further, or I can Kong pre down to something. There's a lot of different variation, but also like output differences. And so people will continue to work because they can collect more challenges, which is also why, like I alluded to earlier, I think the video that we put out this week, hopefully, if it makes some rounds, it should be very useful to and more exciting to parkour practitioners, because there's two challenges in there. Because what we do see popularized is the level variations of climb ups, which we're not huge fans of. And you can do both of them.
Both of them. I can do all five, baby.
Yeah, I mean, well, when I say both, I mean like 4 or 5. Yeah. I haven't quite got to 5, but again, it's just not something I'm going to spend a lot of time on. but what's cool about the variations that we've kind of come up with, and we do them with our really advanced students as well, is their challenges, their ways of kind of quantifying your climb up ability without trying to do, I guess, the variations that the 4 and the 5 represent, right? Because those aren't really going to help you. Those 2 variations probably aren't going to help you so much in connecting lines better or dealing with different structures when it comes to climb ups. But we have, like, I'll just talk about it. Like, we have the deficit climb up, and then we have our, like, inset climb up, which is a bit of a rare find, but it gives you a challenge to do.
Mm-hmm.
It would actually be kind of neat if people posted, like, their highest deficit or inset climb up would be kind of a cool one.
That would be a really cool challenge. Mm-hmm. If you're watching this video, and if you have access to a parkour gym, because you kind of need one for
next time we get Tim out here
for this. Because
he's got the biggest dyno, so you would have to imagine he would have.
Send us your highest inset climb up, and if you don't know what an inset climb up is, go watch our most recent video about climb ups, and you can watch it there. So, any more thoughts on this? So you mentioned the level 4 and level 5. I think of level 5 climb up as being a representation of pulling output, but not necessarily like
also hip mobility.
And hip mobility, yes.
Yeah. But I'm going to use that excuse until I die.
But it's not particularly useful in terms. I mean, you could use like training for a level 5 climb up as a way to develop pulling output. But I think you're going to get more bang for your buck on doing dynos for height and inset climb ups than you would just like learning how to do a level 5. If anything, a level 5 is more just like a flex or a party trick. And level 4, actually, when I went through the process of learning level 4, it helped me understand climb ups a little bit better in terms of position to catch in, because you treat it a little bit more like a Kong at the end. But I don't think that's a necessary process for everybody to go through. In fact, it's probably not going to be useful for most people. So when you get to level 3, just whatever that means is level 3, because there's like a lot of variation within level 3. When you get to that level, you're trying to basically improve that style of climb up, and there's ways to do that, which you could find in our climb up video. So go check it out. And I'd love to see people like trying that inset climb up and see how high they can get. Give me a measurement too. That'd be useful.
Yeah. Before we wrap up here, we got one more topic I want to touch on quickly. I know you got an appointment to get to pretty soon here.
Okay.
But final topic for today is we're giving a shout out to, I don't know how to say his last name, but I'm going to go with Adam Dorr or Adam Dory I'm assuming he's from Sheffield, because all of the thing we're talking about is that's where it's occurring. But he's put out Parkour Bounty, and I've seen like the word used before. Again, I think Ryan Ford did a Parkour Bounty type thing, but definitely lower prize money. So Adam's put up 1,000 pounds, and he's putting up 200 pounds per challenge for a bunch of challenges that are in Sheffield that haven't been done before. And one of them has now been completed by Verke, who we got to talk about real quick as well, because Travis Verke has just coming off an injury and put out 2 monstrous clips, both of them seemingly on wet surfaces, and both of them being Kongs.
Yeah, imagine being injured for like half a year, and then the first thing that you do. Okay, no, I'm not done. Imagine being injured for half a year, and the first 2 things you do, at least publicly, are the most grim Kongs that are huge and done while it's raining or at least actively wet.
Yeah, it's crazy. Like I've talked about this before on the pod, where like coming off of injury, like mental is the last thing to come back, and I know his level is so high
Not
to
for this
begin
guy.
with. But it seems like he's just coming back to the same level.
Yeah.
Like he didn't.
Like he never
didn't
left.
miss a beat. Yeah. And that's just absurd. Whenever I see people, they're special when they can do that, because I know just having to do this like twice now, where I take a long time off to get something rehabbed, and then you're coming back in, and for me it just takes a long time to. And I'm sure he doesn't feel 100 mentally. I'm sure there's talking about Travis.
It's not clear. He's not showing that.
It's not clear to us. No, it's definitely not. So
he's hiding it super well.
yeah.
But yeah, like
What
I
a
mean,
talent,
those two challenges would be difficult to do when it's not wet. Mm-hmm. Right?
Yeah.
And not just difficult to do, but difficult to get yourself to commit to.
Yeah, like world class
Level, even when it's not wet. And he did it in the wet, which is just absurd. Like, how do you? And also just coming off of injury, it's almost like you'd maybe be more cautious. Like, oh, maybe I'll wait for a dry day to try this or something. Nope, not for Travis Furkey.
No.
Incredible, yeah. But I mean, so what are your thoughts quickly on the bounty idea?
Well, first of all, I just feel lazy because Travis is out there in the wet, just.
Yeah, makes me feel like a wuss.
I just feel like I need to achieve more in my life.
It's like, it's wet outside right now, and I'm like, maybe I won't train outside.
Yeah. So one thing I'll say about it, first of all, solid amount of cash for a person doing this on their own. I immediately start like putting myself in the shoes of like Adam here, who is putting up the cash, and I'm like, yeah, like I could see myself doing something like that, but it wouldn't make sense in Vancouver. I just don't think it would make sense. There's just not as many practitioners and not as many people to like. I could think of a list too of stuff where over the years we pointed like, oh yeah, this is gotta get done soon. I mean, one challenge that was a Kong Prix that Holden did in the summer that we had pointed out for a long time. It had been attempted before that no one had ever hit. Right? He didn't get any cash for that because
he just did it for the glory.
But I do think it's cool. I think it's a great concept. I know part of it too is like seems to be like a photographer, and is hoping to get some documentation of them too, because they're all like super grim challenges. And yeah, I could think of things in Vancouver that fit that, and usually we just wait until SPL comes around and take guys like Tim Champion for a stroll and say, hey, you want to hit this thing no one's ever hit before? And it gets done. So the need to put up cash has never really been there. But I do like I like stuff like that. We're a big fan of prizes basically for parkour. I think, as you mentioned, glory, and I think that's where the heart should still, that's what's most important. But it is cool to see just different ways where cash is being given out.
At the end of the day, I don't think Verky did that one for the cash.
No, he's probably like, cool idea.
Yeah, he's probably sure, the cash was a part of it. It put a spotlight on a challenge to make it more desirable to try. But I don't think it's like at the 200, an extra 200 pounds because of that one challenge is like, 200 pounds doesn't go a long way these days.
I do have some coach bounties out right now.
Oh, yes, you do. I only know of the one. What's the other one?
Oh, I just extended it till I started just listing off. I can't even remember.
Oh, okay.
One of them was like Gateful.
Oh, Gateful?
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, so I have some coach bounties out for our coaches at the gym. So if you can, I'm not going to bother listing the moves. I already listed one, and someone watching that might be like, I can do that. Do I get the bounty? No, you don't. you gotta be coaching here. But this was just kind of an added motivation because we have some youth up and coming that want to learn these skills, and a lot of them we can't come close to doing. And so it helps if they have a little bit of a mentor to learn something. So I do like putting out bounties for that stuff.
It helps as like coaches to be able to model the behavior that the kids are interested in, right? It's like when Jewel and Bodie were coming up in the gym, and I'm doing privates with Jewel, and he's like, I want to learn swing cast full, and I was like, all right, I have no idea how to do this, but I will try to help you, you know. So if I was able to do it, I think that would have been a better experience for him as a student. But ultimately, I did my best and I supported him, and he eventually learned it and smashed it. So, but again, if the coaches have like the ability to do the skills that we're trying to, it's just a way better experience for students because they are able to model the behavior a lot easier. Very cool. I love the idea of bounties.
Yeah, I was going to say, do you have anything else to say about it?
No, I like the idea of it. It's cool as long as the love of the love of doing the challenge is like the priority. I think it's really cool.
Yeah. Also, just a side note on that too. The first post I saw from it, and because Callum shared it, but he shared a Parkour UK post. So Parkour UK shared Adam's post. I do not follow Parkour UK. I am now following Adam. But yeah, I thought that was interesting too, that it was shared by Parkour UK. I just can't imagine like if someone was giving away cash for something in the US and like USPK shared it. Maybe, I don't know. It's just that's just an interesting thing because it doesn't seem to be related, but it is happening in the UK, and then therefore they're sharing
Parkour
it.
UK has gotten really good over the last little while of like really trying to like be a better like better integrated into the culture and the community in the UK and like current events. I mean, they actually just put out like a list of events and things happening that includes competitions, including the SPL European qualifier, which is not even taking place in the UK.
But it's open to UK athletes, like very open to them.
Yeah, so it's one of those. It's an organization that historically was very anti-competition, and now I think they're moving much more in a direction of like supporting the general culture of where parkour is being taken. And so,
was it really anti?
I think it was because there was, most of this was hearsay, but there was supposed to be a UK parkour championships that was going to happen, and then I think Parkour UK came in and blocked it. And this was years ago.
Yeah.
So, or at least that's the perspective that.
Someone gonna correct us in the comments here.
Yeah, we'd love to hear it. Please do.
Yeah.
Okay, I think I gotta go.
We gotta go. Yep. Thanks for tuning in. Apologies for the burps today. I think I was down to like a fish oil before we recorded here, so I'll try not to do that next week. Sorry, Tom. But anyways, drop us a like as usual if you like the video. If these videos are valuable to you, we'd also appreciate it if you share it with a friend. Subscribe to the channel if you haven't done so already. Give us a 5-star review on Apple or Spotify, and we'll be back at you next week.